Hello, everyone, and welcome to RHAP's coverage of Australian Survivor Brains V Brawn II. I'm your host, Shannon Guss. I was thrown off because you were smiling, so you were seemed so happy about something. Was it the intro video? I don't know. I was thrown off. I did the intro wrong. Here's Mike Bloom.
Just being in your presence, Shannon. I mean, this is a veritable American feast, even though I am the American here.
Yeah, and you could have been so many blanks to my blank because there are pairs this week.
I know,
Which
exactly.
pair
It's
do
all
you want to
about.
be?
Well, now I'm nervous though because Zara's plan is to just keep breaking off the duos one by one. So I feel like my life is on the line personally.
Well, I think we should still be a duo. We should take that risk.
Yes, but what's very fun is I actually do think we sometimes, I don't know if you have experienced this sometimes, Shannon, I sometimes do. What happened to AJ at the beginning of this episode, where like he really had nothing to do with what Miles did, yet somehow the information gets back to him of like, you should know about this, right? Like, surely if Miles did something, you would be the one to know about it. And I'm like, 90% of the time, yes, usually I am aware of stuff that Shannon does, but that 10%, sometimes I'm not entirely sure. And I go to her and I'm like, what's the context behind this?
Would you get in trouble for things that I say and do?
Not in trouble, no. I would say if that was the case, I apologize to you because I'm sure there are people coming to you if that's the case, being like, "What stupid shit did your best friend do this week?"
I feel like it's the opposite with us. Like AJ's getting in trouble for what Miles did. I feel like it's the opposite, where we've had stuff where we both do things and only I get in trouble. Don't you think that that's happened? Where listeners are like so angry at me. I'm like, Mike said it too, but he said it in a cheerier way, and he's just more lovable than I am.
No, well, that is not true whatsoever.
It is, but it's a high bar.
That I was gonna say. So that being said, Jen, talk about high bar here. I mean,
Yes.
bit of an odd merge week, but we finish, I think, on a high note. I would dare to say, not only the best episode of the week by a country mile, but best episode maybe since 9 for me, which makes it all the more egregious as to look. Spoiler alert. I got a lot of bones to pick with people this episode that we're gonna get into, but I think
Don't get me in trouble for it though.
Yeah, exactly. But
Yeah.
Shannon will be the one that will take the blame. But the person who's taking the blame in this instance is whoever the hell is running the marketing for Australian Survivor. Someone that we have talked about many a times. Of course, marketing sort of like the 25th castaway of an Australian Survivor season. And much like the castaways this season, they're doing these random things that we honestly have no method to their madness.
Yes. Okay. Firstly, the marketing department is trying to get the ratings up against Married at First Sight, which is the TV Everest of Australian programming. It's true. So I don't envy the job. But to just give some context into the last few days of our life, now to be transparent, we are still like a day and a bit from the Tuesday night episode. So maybe tomorrow they're going ham on the Tuesday night marketing. But Mike texted the recap bitches this weekend to be like, I guess I'm not in this week because the marketing was like Sunday, Monday.
Yeah, there's an Instagram post that's like 2 explosive episodes coming on Sunday and Monday. And I'm like, okay, I guess first, because for those that have not watched an Australian Survivor season live, maybe there are some points in a season where they do go to 2 episodes a week.
Yeah, but I'd been told that wasn't going to happen, at least now. I don't know. Clearly, I do not know the schedule based on the chaos you're about to hear about. So I did digging, and like they're like, okay, there's gonna be a Tuesday night episode. It's on the TV Guide. Like I went to a lot of different sources, and like there seems like there's gonna be a Tuesday night episode. But then I watched Sunday, and I thought Sunday was snoozy. So and then I thought Monday was snoozy until the last moment, which was really a fun moment. Yeah. That made it a good episode. But then I was like, oh my god, like how bad is Tuesday that Sunday night is OMG and Tuesday's not even worth a mention? Now again, maybe tomorrow Tuesday night is like Sunday, Monday was OMG, but Tuesday night's like makes OMG look like crap. Like maybe that's going to be the marketing. But the fact that they left out Tuesday and then Monday I thought was just, Sunday I thought was just fine, made me think someone must have been like quitting or being medevac. And I did really enjoy this episode. You're probably right that it is the best since 9. But then the entire episode, I was like, they're not going to go to tribal council. Someone's about to quit. Someone's about to be medevaced. And then when they went to tribal council,
he's going to come back into the game and then leave again.
Literally, I was so confused. And they went to tribal council, and I'm like, to be fair, even if someone would have quit now, it's been a really fun episode. There's been dynamic start to finish. There was last gasp. Like the stakes were really high to the point where it plays out in a vote between some of the biggest people in the game. Yeah. The entire hierarchy flips. It was very exciting. I didn't know what was going to happen until the last moment. I thought AJ was going. And again, the stakes are so high. It's Laura or AJ or Logan. These are some of the biggest characters in the game by far. It was very fun. It was the most fun episode, as you said, of the week and probably since 9. It made the whole week, like it finished off on a really fun note, and I thought made it a fun week overall. Why are they burying the episode? What happened? Anyway, we'll talk about it in the feedback show because maybe tomorrow will be the marketing push. But I really did hear of this episode for 2 days, and then it was just very fun.
Even if Tuesday was a bit of a womp womp of an episode, if you are broadcasting 3 days a week, how do you advertise and leave out 1/3 of your programming? Like, just say that it's a merge week full of big explosive moments. It boggles the mind. But Shannon, again, as I mentioned before, maybe it properly gets us into kind of the mindset of breaking down the cast of Australian Survivor Brains versus Brawn 2, which is all about vibes, yet somehow making strategic decisions based on said vibes.
I mean, and maybe it's about lowering expectations. I think this was the best episode ever because I came in
Lowering expectations.
Yeah, the what? The expectations?
Lowering expectations.
Oh, okay. I was like, I couldn't think of where the pun. It was worth it, Mike. It was worth it.
Thank you.
Yeah, because Laura went home, and that was massive. The whole hierarchy flipped on its head, which is so crazy because yesterday Puya and I came in very critical of Miles's move, and one of the main reasons was I felt like it didn't get anything done. We were like, really, for Petey, all of that, and I felt like it didn't crack the numbers. And what I wanted him to do was to amass a majority against what he even describes in this episode is like the women who are going to pick them off. And I felt like it did not do that, made him a target while still leaving the status quo in check. And I thought maybe even bonding them against him when they have been very fractured. And then this episode, like, to be clear, I still think that happened. I still think that is all the idol play achieved. I think independently this episode, they won the war of relationships to amass that army. Now they've made up so much ground that they've done everything and more I hope that move would do. But I feel like they did it somehow, even with some, I thought, missteps in this episode, independently of the move. I feel like they dug themselves into a hole, kind of Tony style. Miles did. I don't want to, and this is actually funny that we're putting, because I do this with my parents all the time. Like, if my dad does something, I'll be like, you guys did this. And my mom will be like, that is so unfair. So AJ is getting that with Miles.
Yes, but to be fair, there is everything that AJ has done prior to this that would make you believe he was involved because it's weird shenanigans. And B,
and Jay,
when Logan ends Tribal Council by being like, did you know about this, AJ? AJ doesn't say no. He goes, maybe.
And he voted for Petey.
Why would you say that, AJ, if you don't want to be sketchy?
That's true. And honestly, sometimes my mom's also doing that with my dad, but she doesn't want to face that they're a team either on that. And she's like, that's not fair, put it on him. So it was very, very similar to that. But my point is that I felt like they and mostly Miles, but as a team, like my parents, dug themselves into a hole. And then this episode separately got themselves all the way out to the absolute top of the food chain. And I still criticized the move yesterday, but yes, they made up so much ground here that they've done everything I wanted them to do and probably even more.
Yeah, it is absolutely wild to me. And look, I think that part of the reason why you very understandably analyzed it the way you did is that, like, yeah, we got some stuff from Miles in yesterday's episode being like, I don't want Paulie to go. I could do this. But we really didn't get that much explanation as to your point, why PD, right? There was like a little bit of explanation as to like, well, he won't want to work with us. I mean, we'll get into it in this episode that, like, I don't know, my dude, maybe you left a couple people to make the jury that also you might be a little bit in trouble of voting for you in the end. But, what I think, and we'll talk about this with the Karin move as well, I would imagine that as independent and wild card and chaotic of a move that Miles made, I do think he made it with at least some sense of security as to whom he was coming back to, which is how he proceeds forward with the graduates. Again, this might be over-assigning too much credit, but I would imagine that he had this plan in his head of like, okay, if I make this move, then the goal is to get the graduates, together back again, because then if we have Paulie on our side, we can kind of run the table, and that is pretty much what happens. Not to mention as well, we'll talk about the Kayin Morgan side of things. I think a lot of what it came down to for him was the fact that, Kayin Morgan did want to work with him before. And, he says at Tribal Council, I thought I was spreading drama with the move I made, but there was even more drama back at camp. And I don't know if he purposely made this happen, but I think a non-zero reason why Logan ends up, having to play the idol the way she does is because they did not like the way that she reacted to everything. So yeah, to your point, I think that I think a lot of the work that was done this episode was not necessarily because of what he did. It did still feel unnecessary. And look, there will be a couple of things I have to pick at with Miles, who I think overall, I'm going to say gets my 3 Chizzy points. Like, I still think,
really?
yeah, I still think he won the episode, but there are a couple things that I had some issues with. And Miles, I know you're listening. You can at me with some explanations here, maybe starting with why PD, because it still doesn't necessarily feel like this was the part of the equation that had to get cracked for the calculus of the rest of your game to unfold.
No, don't tweet that at us. Save it for the deep dive. We'll find out after the season all the ways we were wrong. But I mean, I still think that it was so separate. The first caveat to coming back to the graduates is Karin. And we've talked about how Karin is like this big missing piece and how bad it was for AJ to have lost Karin. That was the numbers, right? That's the majority. If you're coming back with Paulie and then 4 of the 5 graduates, that's 5 of 11, not 6 of 11. And Karin is not wanting to be with them at all. So I feel like that's the missing piece. Then they get over Morgan and Kate, which makes a full majority. I feel like that's in some ways to me unforeseeable, and we'll talk about their decision, but also so separate. And that's AJ. I mean, you talk about you want to give Miles 3 points. For me, I'm really looking at AJ. To have Morgan and Kate say to each other, I don't want AJ to go, and I really like AJ.
Yeah, we need more of his completely organic compliments, please.
AJ won the battle of relationships with those compliments, and everyone hates them, and they're cringe AF.
But they work. And that's the theme, and that's the theme of this duo, is that somehow what they're doing is working, in spite of everything they're doing that works against it on paper.
Exactly. So I feel like that's a very separate thing, but it was really interesting because yesterday with Puyo, we were talking about like possible 8-3 splits where you come over the top with maybe like a Kaylin, we thought being like with a 7-4 and an idol and helping them. And that ends up being kind of the conversation that Karin's having on the other side to help Logan, these like 8-3 into 7-4 splits that could fail with an idol. So really, really interesting dynamics. But yeah, I mean, I just think that they won a very separate battle of relationships. And I think other things were more impactful than the idol play. Like for sure, Logan reacting to it, which is again, not something they're controlling. It's not like we did it to really set Logan off. That has impact. And it was shocking to me to hear all these negative things said about what's meant to be the socially insulated queen, Logan, where they're saying she likes to, she needs her way and it's all the drama. Like the way that people reacted to Logan reacting was really negative. But I think that the main piece of the puzzle, and probably what Miles does best in this episode, was disseminating the idol information, which again, you can criticize in ways because it feels so uncontrolled. He literally lets it loose. And it's Kaylin's information. And he lets it loose at a reward.
Yeah, and especially seconds after, he's like, well, we're not going to talk strategy because this is too many people to talk, specific plans with. By the way, I'm just going to loosely put out an APB on Logan's idol. Yeah. But I think it works well in so many ways. First, again, whether or not this was the way he meant to do it or him just playing the hand that he dealt for himself, he really steers into this curve of like, okay, if I am this incredibly chaotic player, again, it's like what we talked about last week, right? With him being like, well, they think I'm the jungle rat who goes out looking for idols, so I guess I should start looking for idols. If people think I'm this giant wild card, then I can just kind of get carte blanche to do a bunch of stuff, because how much more is my social standing going to fall? And so, yeah, he's going to just throw out some information. I think it works on so many levels. First off, the fact that she does have this, I think in a general sense, will spread the information and will make the idol less powerful, despite the fact that Logan does save herself here. It does kind of get everyone on board as much as Miles doesn't want this unifying gesture. It is a way for people to be like, oh, that's something we need to immediately get rid of. And that's why you could argue maybe the reason why he ends up going through with the entire fireworks last time is to maybe disguise the fact that he has an idol himself.
Yeah, that was the best thing he achieved.
Yeah, it's like when Jeremy plays the idol on Steven, right? It's like, well, surely he doesn't have another one. Otherwise, why would he necessarily do that? I think what's also interesting...
Well, that should actually make you think he definitely has another one, because...
I guess that's true, yeah, because he has money to spare.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like with this as well... Not that you could really think about it, because once someone's stolen an idol, I mean, it's like a magic trick. Like you're looking at that over the other idol, but like if you really think about it, it's like he could afford to spend one on PD because he's like still packing some heat.
Yeah, but the other thing is that, and this doesn't end up playing out, but I thought this could have been such an interesting move if Karin was in the right mood, because what has been Karin's main sticking point with AJ, despite the, except for the fact that he gets his socializing skills via ChatGPT? He had an advantage. He didn't tell me about it. It's a really nice piece of evidence to be like, oh, and you think you can trust Logan? Let me tell you about the idol that she's kept hidden from you.
But
Even though
Karin knows about the idol, but I don't think that he doesn't know necessarily that Karin knows.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
But so I would imagine that's another reason why, again, Karin doesn't necessarily react to that the way that she did. But I think if you were in his viewpoint, that would be something that you can get across. But yeah, it's such a weird thing about this season is how brazen and transparent people are with their strategies, yet sort of opaque at the same time. You have people like AJ and Miles making these completely independent moves, but then being very upfront to people. Alongside Miles being so open at this reward is AJ being like, yeah, I'm just going to call it right now. I think Kristen wants to get rid of me. And Kristen's just sitting across being like, yep, that's right, buddy. You're gone. So the fact that we'll talk about this with the jury, right? Like, yes, there are things that players and juries might want to have in ideal objective qualities, but the gameplay of a season is often dictated by the players, whether it be the speed, the quality, the timbre, etc. And it seems like the timbre of this season is like nobody can really keep a secret. And when they do, they immediately do something that should theoretically blow up their game, but like somehow gets people wanting to rope them in on the next big move.
This was the most AJ and Miles way to win a vote, in that so much of it was so clunky. Like, as you said, like, it's not even just the like open stated war with like a Kristen, it's then trying to include her in the vote and reading that wrong as an example. It's the fact that
or approaching her and being like, oh, so you know it, right? Like, surely someone else must have told you what the plan is. No? Oh, okay. Well, here you go. Can you do it?
Yeah. They didn't know how to handle Kristen, but Miles is right where he's like, no one can really do anything. I mean, Karin could, but he was like, she's not individually going to do anything. And then to be fair, she doesn't. Like, she sticks with that side, and we can talk about it. So they were reading the right numbers that they had correctly, and like also reading how much anyone would do against that majority in like a Karin, and they were correct on that. I mean, another thing with Miles is like he's openly at war with Logan. The conversation that they're having with each other is a crazy thing to have, like, in polite society, let alone like on Survivor.
It was bad. It was very, very bad when
From both?
Logan says like, well, you didn't just piss me off, you pissed Laura off. And he responds like, well, Laura is smart and we'll get over it. Like, dude, if your plan is to vote Logan off, what are you implying to her right now?
But it's an open war that neither of them should be, some subterfuge would be good. Neither of them should be entertaining that. But he wins. Like, at the end of the day, if you're going to be so audacious, you better like get a massive win, and he does. I think that it's a very concerning state of affairs when AJ is your janitor. But it works for them, and it's just like such a classic way for them to win this vote. It was also a really classic way for the Coven to lose this vote, to lose like a key member of the Coven, really, this, of the starting four. This is the first member we lose. And I loved it so much because the Coven are unhinged, as we've spoken about many times. And the fact that there's a little meeting where they're like, oh my God, a Coven meeting, leading to a very complex betrayal where like Zara's fully out, Karin's half out, was wonderful. It was so Coven. And this cast is just very much delivering on the tropes I expect from them at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's so sad. Like, I was really hoping the Coven made the Final Four because, Shannon, we would have like 3 different 2-on-1s going on if these 4 had made the Final Four, where like they would be looking to flip on their number 1s and then flip back from their number 1s. Such, again, an incredibly deliciously complicated that will only become even more complicated now that Logan is coming back. Because, yeah, we sort of have the degrees of being in on this Laura vote, where it was Zara, who's like, I cannot wait to get rid of her, obviously smelling the bad blood back from this advantage. Logan, who was incredibly left in the dark, and Karin, who is straddling both sides in a manner of speaking, or at least trying to tip off a very certain outcome while at the same time trying to also disguise herself within the majority so she doesn't stick out too much.
Yeah, and I did think that for Laura to go here, maybe Laura will one day face Zara as a jury member, but I do, like, if Zara's in the final tribal council, but I do think that even if not, this was a wonderful end to what's been such an entertaining arc when she looks at Zara and is like, who did you vote for?
Yes.
And it's like, this has been a long time coming. I'd love to talk about Karin here because Karin has a very active decision to make about whether she should, because if she and Kristen are actually doing stuff in tandem, which I quite actually liked for Karin to do because it kind of gives another social option. We kind of talked about this actually with Laura and Zara way back when about like filling Zara in on the plan of the split way back at the max vote. And I thought, okay, well, we eventually got to the point through feedback questions that was like, maybe Laura should have left like Zara in her dust, like she will later try to, instead of trying to create that social option to like get ahead of her in the hierarchy. But I think for Karin, it's something that they need to do together anyway. And also she is higher than Kristen in the hierarchy, clearly. Like Kristen's such an easy, like, you know, consensus.
Kristen was one of the last to find out about the vote.
And she's the conversation that Logan and AJ are even pretending to have with each other, where he won't even pretend to give her another name. Like Kristen's the only easy name. So I feel like bringing her along, it's something that they have to do, and they're working very much in tandem. So Karin's really leading this decision of whether she should flip to a minority, basically, and give Logan the ability to win the vote, and their 4 votes come over the top of what would be a 3. If anyone's confused about the split, so they think it's like a 9-2, or maybe an 8-3 without Kristen. But if she were to tell Logan and they were to negate all the Logan votes and then their 4 come over the top of 3 split Laura votes, they win the day, taking out AJ. Now, I do not back Karin doing that. I assumed she was doing it once she was tipping off Logan. I thought AJ was gone. I didn't know if Miles might play the idol in AJ. That was but then I was like, they're splitting.
Yeah, I was debating that as well, but like, but they again, he's stuck with the plan. Yeah,
because they were splitting, so it's like her playing the idol was part of the design, and then Laura goes home, which she does. So, yeah, I mean, she does the half move. She's trying to like have her cake and eat it too, where she does not flip to the minority. And I wouldn't back flipping to a minority, but she tips off Logan, and I feel like maybe she's left with no cake at all.
I don't know. So I think when it comes to Karin, you know, I think much like we talked about with this Miles decision, she's thinking about, first off, when it comes to like actively flipping, I agree. Like, I do not think she should have, as much fun as it would have been to have, you know, the split essentially get reversed here. I do not think that she should have flipped and tried to keep both Logan and Laura in the game. Because again, it comes down to who you go back to. And yeah, Miles did tick off a lot of people in the moment about what he did, but he was able to come back to some relationships. Karin outlines it very nicely that like she would torch a good amount of people in doing this, something that would really put her out in front and Kristen by proxy. And also, not to mention the fact that, again, while Miles was on a bit of an island, there were still some connections that he had, or that he felt that AJ had, to other people to help bring them in to a fairly solid place. Logan, this vote shows, is very on the outs. Now, look, we're just talking about how Paulie, you know, got so many votes against him the past 2 tribal councils and got bupkis this episode. So maybe this can turn on a dime. But she doesn't necessarily have the relationships that I think you could say, great, I have her in my pocket, and therefore she comes with this person and this person. And so I don't know if you're necessarily hitching your wagon to Logan and Laura as like, okay, we're going to ride forward with this new majority, because there isn't much of a majority there. There would be...
it's 4 of 10.
Right, there would be a block. I guess the advantages of tipping the idol play but not doing anything, I think Karin is a lot closer with Logan than she is with Laura. I think of the 2, she would want to keep Logan, and I think Logan is more likely to separate herself from others socially, again, just due to kind of the personality that she has and the way that she reacts to things. So that is going to, again, put her more so in Karin's corner. They obviously have spent the entirety of the pre-merge together, so I think they are a lot tighter than she is with Laura. And it also, I mean, I guess either way, right, it would have gotten an idol out of the game, but it certainly does help kind of release that hold that the idol might have had, and does invite some more chaos into the game, but at the same time is able to help kind of make her less threatening as well to proceed forward as something that could be weaponized against you.
I do not back this. Firstly, I mean, on her wanting to work with Logan over the graduates, I think we saw Logan win that war of relationships as AJ was losing it into the swap. And I think that's very valid, that she really doesn't want to work with them. And look, she has the ick. We have learned from Nobody Wants Us, you can get past the ick, but I think it's quite a big ick right now. So it's going to be really, really tough for her. The issue is she's already lost. Like, the graduates have won all the other numbers. And like, if she can get into the graduates and just be where she doesn't want to be for a while, it's not a terrible spot to try swipe at them later. And it's also her best bet at the point where they've won the numbers otherwise. So I think she has to do that. Then it's about saving her closer relationship in Logan compared to Laura. I just think it's too cute because of a couple of reasons. It puts a lot of heat on her back. Does it even keep in what's going to be a positive relationship? If I were Logan, I wouldn't be grateful at all. The way that Karin does this is so clearly self-serving. Like, she's trying to minimize risk by telling her at tribal council, and even then, they're kind of asking questions and almost blowing it up. She's not answering when Logan's asking her what's going on. If I were Logan, I would say, so you knew about it, voted against me, you did save my life, but I lost an idol, I lost an ally, and had you told me earlier in the day, maybe I try and get those relationships back over and actually win the day rather than barely escaping with my life. So I'm not super grateful. Another thing that Logan is desperate. Like, if she's next on the chopping block, something I might do if I have nothing is not rely on Karin, because that might not be enough, but I might throw her under the bus. Like, hey, better the devil, like, I'm just a straight up enemy of you. Okay, she's in your home as a possible ally who tipped me off. So I don't think that it really bonds Logan to her. I feel like you're saving a relationship that you've actively probably, I would think impacted negatively, because it's so clearly self-interested. She's clearly cornered Logan with all of the leverage. It's like, okay, thank you for making me play my idol, lose my ally, vote against me, have nowhere to go, and not give me any more warning to actually make something happen. Like, with friends like this, who needs enemies? And that should be probably the tagline of the Coven. So I wouldn't be grateful, and I thought it was a little bit too cute. And I think you would love if they just happened to be targeting Laura over Logan from a closeness perspective. But I think everything she had to lose just to gain that relationship with Logan being there still over Laura, for me, wasn't enough and is very risky.
I don't know. I feel like Logan is somebody who is going to very quickly make a list of enemies when she gets back to camp. And I feel like Karin is going to be at the bottom of that list, just due to the fact that, again, also remember, and one of the reasons why Karin also tries to disguise herself in the majority is the fact that every other person in the tribe voted against her and Laura. That's what Lauren says right out. She's like,
as did Karin.
Did you vote for me? And Logan's like, everyone did. And so I think in that moment, I think you look to the people that helped you first, or at least tried to make a gesture. I can absolutely see your logic that it's an easy reason to throw somebody under the bus. It's like, oh, look at what Karin was doing. On the other hand, I think there's a very good chance that Logan takes what happened at face value, and it is any port in a storm. And she is saying, well, you gave me something when everybody else was lying to me. That is something in my book.
It just might not be enough of a port. And for sure, does she hate AJ and Miles more than Karin? I'm not saying that's not true. I'm just saying that Karin might be the viable option. If you have nothing and you're on death's door and you're desperate, and now Karin has given verifiable information to a desperate person who doesn't owe her, I think, a lot, and no one owes anyone anything in Survivor, she might want to work with Karin, and it might be like, it's you or me, because you did something that I can throw under the bus in a really verifiable way. And why do you think I need to play my idol? She's playing both sides. That's more dangerous to you, a possible ally who's playing both sides compared to me, and I'm just like on the outs. That would be something I would do if I was on death's door. If I was Logan, I think she gave her too much and didn't gain enough. So I disagreed with that. I would love to also talk about another duo that I disagreed with, and I feel like I'm always coming and disagreeing with them. But Morgan and Kate, I don't understand, because here's my question. Like, okay, whatever.
I mean, you can also say that about them in general, just because we have seen very, very little of them. I'm not entirely sure I don't know what their end game plans are at this point.
Exactly. Where is the permanence of relationships? So I've come in for, I don't know, it felt like years, but I guess it's been like, I don't know, a week, criticizing them turning on Braun for the women. Because I was like, whatever. It's been spoken about to death. I was like, that's your group. You have less agency necessarily with the women. But they did then go to the women. And I thought they worked into a spot that was pretty good with the women now, because if the women had the choice between going with the Brains or with the women, AJ and Miles have blown up any Brains question, any like Brains group. So now it feels like it's going to be the women. And that's actually what AJ and Miles are like, we need to form a coalition against what's going to be the women picking us up. And that's what we're going to have the graduates. They then choose to flip on this now good spot with the women for AJ, who they just met, who is AJ, has to be said. And
yeah, like again, you haven't had a lot of FaceTime with him. You did have him actively threaten your tribe to throw challenges, or they would get rid of your friends.
Yes, and anyway, whatever. The flirting is working, but you would just think that they wouldn't necessarily want to flip just for AJ, like great from AJ, but like to what we see as like, to me, the bottom of that kind of big group. You know, and like Miles says that Paulie's on his long-term plans, which was crazy coming out. It was like Paulie was like the one thing he really gained, I thought, from the vote to take out PD.
I mean, it's interesting. Yeah, the one thing he gained, I think essentially what he was doing was expending that advantage to get Paulie as a juror, which is like, again, a pretty dang good call on Miles' part if that's the intention behind it.
Well, if I'm Paulie and I'm literally only a juror because of Miles, yeah, you best vote for Miles if he's at the end. So I do think that there's stuff that I would have thought that Paulie was like a long-term ally for him, and Paulie's so grateful that I don't see why not. But even wherever Paulie sits, it's like it's Miles and AJ. They have Zara. Morgan and Kate maybe don't think they have Karin as much, but like Karin could be in there with Zara. Kaylin's in there. Then there's even Paulie, who you would think would be really close to this group. And like, stop flipping to the bottom of majorities. Be in the like. And now they've done it twice. Where is the permanence in any of their relationships? And for AJ, Mike, for AJ, what?
I know. That's the one thing. They're like, we don't want drama at camp. We're siding with AJ. And it's like, wow, AJ got very lucky that he drew a different buff than the two of you. Because look, just ask Karin.
But you saw it from the mat. What do you mean? Is this a well-kept secret?
I have no clue what is going on with these two, if I'm being completely honest. Because, I mean, I even think about this in terms of, like, Zara, because I want to talk about her logic a little bit as to, like, her joining the graduates. Yeah, it's like, what do they think the end game is? And we can talk about this now, because we're only 6 episodes from the end. Like, we're 9 episodes from the end.
Yes.
We're starting the jury. So, like, I think people need to be legitimately considering this. And yeah, maybe it's a bit of a sort of like we talked about in the swap, right? Like there are only 4 brawn that are left. And so maybe they're trying to think out of self-preservation of like, we'll go into this group, but then maybe we'll crack the group. But at the same time, you're swapping into this brains majority. And as much as the graduates has been able to remain undercover, I don't know how good of a first impression Kaylin and AJ and Karin have been making to be like, yeah, these are the people I can go to the end with. That's totally fine.
And they're such key swing votes. Like that's a very different decision for Karin. If Karin's looking to be a 4th of what would end up if she wins the vote, 4 of 10. That's very different to flipping to what then would be a 6, where you have Kristen who wants to clearly go with Laura and Logan. You have Laura, Logan, you have Morgan and Kate. Now you're the 6. Now I think at that point, go with the majority. Like, yeah, you lose Zara, but you're in a group you want to work with, and it's the majority. At that point, that's fine because you're not flipping to a minority. That's like such a key decision. What a key, incredible win for AJ, and what an absolutely baffling decision from Morgan and Kate, who will just go anywhere the wind blows, it seems, and just flip to like new groups completely, to the bottom of new groups where I feel like they're way less. As soon as they like climb up to the top of a group, they're like, I'm bored, and they just jump down to the next group. Why?
Maybe it was that they just got such a bad vibe from Logan. Because remember,
that's crazy.
Laura is a person who a week ago they're like, yeah, we'll work with you. We totally want to go with you. For some reason, like maybe they were just really turned off by the way that Logan reacted to that stuff, and they said that's not somebody I can work with, which again is why they then choose to side with AJ and Miles,
which is I mean, counterpoint, obviously it's Logan or AJ and Miles. Like there's pitfalls everywhere. I just think that that's a shocking reason. That would be a shocking reason, I think, to jump to the bottom of a majority anyway. Like I feel like there's like such a clear hierarchy now where it feels like it's like Miles and AJ, Kaylin, Zara, Paulie somewhere in there. Karin can be in there if she wants, but may have blown up her spot. Then them. That's not in the majority. Then Morgan and Kate. And then Kristen. And now Logan. Like, so they're like, that's, so even if they're getting bad vibes from Logan, it wouldn't be enough for me to flip to that position in the hierarchy. And anyway, it's the vibes they're getting from Logan compared to the vibes they're getting from AJ, which they freaking love. Which is, that comparison shouldn't be disparate enough, I think, to make such a, like, you know, structurally unsound move.
Well, not to mention, and they probably don't know this, but let's talk about Zara's tactic of seeing the game as a bunch of pairs and deciding what I want to do is start picking off singles from each pair. First off, let me say, Survivor players, don't do this. We just talked about Karin taking a half measure, much like Breaking Bad once infamously said, no half measures. I feel like Rob's fact checker could do some sort of average of like, whenever there's a duo and you vote off one person, the other person makes it probably on average at least 3 votes further. Like there is just this psychological mentality where nobody finishes the job. It's just, okay, well, now that this person doesn't have their closest ally anymore, they're defenseless. We don't need them anymore. Let's move on to the bigger threats. And as a result, they are able to skate by. We've seen a good amount of these winners who have done so despite losing their closest allies. And we also saw sort of a prominence of this in something even like Blood versus Water, right? Which had pairs in a very different way. But what happens when you start making a bunch of singles happen? There could be a point where the singles outnumber the pairs, and suddenly the pairs become a lot more threatening and are outnumbered and can suddenly become targeted. So that is all to say that for Morgan and Kate, I don't know if they realize this strategy is happening, but like, okay, Petey and Kristen are broken up. Logan and Laura are broken up. If the graduates want to keep breaking up pairs, who do you think they're going to break up next?
Yeah, I do think that Logan is still in big trouble. I mean, she was the target who escaped. So it's like, it's one thing to break up pairs. Like maybe Laura survives further on if Logan gets taken out. But like
I think that's definitely the case. Yeah, I think Laura. It's almost, and again, it's also usually when this happens, it's like when the alpha of the pair goes from like an edit or vocal perspective, the beta is able to make it a lot further because they were usually the one that was more underestimated anyway.
You know that Logan is a big personality when Laura is the beta of the pair. These are two strong personalities.
So to be fair, like again, the version that they've seen of Laura is like pretty defenseless, right? Like she was declawed for most of that swap. So it's not the version of Laura that we saw in the pre-swap.
Well, the crazy thing about it is I've been giving Laura so much praise this week. I gave her 5 chili points in the last 2 episodes, mostly due to positioning, and now she's out of the game. And it feels like she wasn't shielded by like the good work she's done with Miles. Like Miles likes her and wants to work with her, and it still wasn't enough in terms of like how threatening she and Logan were, and Logan's idol was, and what Logan was doing was, and she's like collateral damage to that. And she feels like she's getting one over on Miles, and like not only is obviously she's getting got, but also it's just not enough from a positioning standpoint. But I do think that, had Logan gone, that positioning does probably keep her around now that she's completely defanged. For Logan, I think they might finish the job because Logan was the big white whale. She was the intended target. But I think that when Zara's talking about pairs, I mean, it's not all pairs. It's certainly not her and Karin. It's probably not AJ and Miles. So who's the 5th pair?
Well, that's it. I don't know if you talked about this. I did love that Paulie was like, everyone's in a pair, and then also just doesn't mention Kaylin whatsoever.
Well, that's great for Kaylin. Like, I think that, firstly, I'm very high on both Zara and Kaylin. They are massive double agents here. Like, not only are they technical swings, but they make a good decision, unlike Morgan and Kate. They're like, complete double agents that completely snow the Laura and Logan side who think that they're going to be in on a split vote. I mean, Laura and Logan think they're doing a split vote. They think that they have splittable numbers and it's everyone against them. And that's, where this falls. And I think that a lot of that is on Morgan and Kate and Zara and Kaylin, who I think do really, really well. I think for Zara, she's crucial, especially in why Karin has to fold, as well as like not necessarily being in the numbers. I think she does great work, again, in snowing Laura and Logan with like the Coven of it all. And then for Kaylin as well, like Kaylin, who's been playing the middle the whole time, now has had to pick a side, and I think gets to a spot where he is way at the top of the hierarchy, is not looked at as a pair, which is great. People are so happy to have him taking up the immunities rather than feeling threatened by him, that both Logan and Miles, who hate each other, say it. Like that speaks to such a great communal social game where two people on completely opposite sides will talk about how happy that they've that he's won immunity. And then I think like I was concerned, we were like, okay, great. Logan's idol wasn't stolen. Kaylin gets away with like having spread that information. He showed his loyalties by telling AJ that information, and now it hasn't come back to bite him. Then now it's being outed again, and Kaylin could really be in the crossfire of that. But again, they win. Like if Logan's mad about that, she's at the bottom. So finally he took a stand, and that stand was giving information to AJ. And I don't know if he intended it to go this way, but they ran with it, and they've now won the war. And the stand he's taken has created a structure where he's at the top. So it was like about playing the middle unto a point where like now we're actually like cementing something, and cemented something very, very good. And his information was crucial. We talked about it last week when Logan found the idol, how much he intended to tell Kaylin versus how much he was just there. And that's one of the most interesting questions, I think, for a future deep dive, because it really dooms Logan. And Kaylin is so unassuming to the point where he barely gets confessionals, but it's such important, crucial information that basically I think is the main part of why, and also the battle of relationships, but like one of the main things of why this can happen and why his side with AJ and Miles can win the day. So I think that he's as under the radar as possible for A, his archetype, and B, what he's actually achieving for that group, and it goes so well for him. And finally, yeah, he's taken a stand that's gone incredibly well. So yeah, very high on both Zara and Kaylin here. Now I'm like,
Yeah.
now I'm really rethinking some of my Chizzy points. But
I know. Well,
both of them,
no, I
yeah.
don't know. For me, it's. I mean, this is why I'm so glad not only you get to the chance to have a microphone put in front of you because you're so incredibly eloquent when it comes to
Oh.
strategy. Because, like, I mean, Kaylin's so freaking boring on this show.
What?
But like,
Oh,
but
it's because you're a straight man, probably.
yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Yes. But at the same time,
He's
like,
so sweet, Mike. What do you mean he's boring? He keeps injuring people. He can't control his own strength.
that's the most interesting thing about him. But at the
It's
same time,
fascinating.
you're able to point out the fact that, and I would not be surprised if, like, once the more interviews you do and the more deep dives you do, it's going to come out that, like, oh no, Kaylin was actually one of the most important people in, like, the
I
structure
don't
of everything.
know. I think
Like,
about that all the time, like how much credit Kaylin just racks up Chizzy points with no confessionals every episode. And what if he was not important at all? What if it's complete fan fiction? I actually think about
yeah,
this
like,
quite
what if
often.
it was he's like, no, actually, that confessional that I gave before where, like, I was just playing to the stereotypes. No, I was lying to the cameras. Like, I just want to be there to have coconuts.
Yeah, possibly. But I mean, look, at the end of the day, Logan's idol information was incredibly crucial, and that came from Kaylin. Like,
Yeah,
it was
exactly.
materially very important.
That was the cow that started the Chicago fire right there. And also, I mean, I would put forward American history there from the American Feast. I would not be surprised if Kaylin finishes at least top 3 in every challenge from now on. Like, it just seems like his body type and his set of athleticism is perfect for a lot of these challenges. He's proven himself both on land and on sea shit in these past 2 episodes.
Well, when I post the Chizzy charts, I do get comments like, why is Kaylin there? I never see him. I'm like, this is the Chizzy charts, not the confessional charts. And you know that Kaylin's not winning. Because if Kaylin were going to win, and he, in his archetype, playing a game that I think is very underrated, it would be over-edited so much that it would probably be annoying.
Yeah,
like that's how he's
Australian
definitely
Survivor,
annoying.
they want to make characters out of their winners. Even, like, if they play some of the most run-of-the-mill games, they try to make them big personalities because they want a quote-unquote satisfying outcome from their audience.
True, but not just that. Like, if it was like Kristen, I'd be like, maybe that's Kristen's winner edit. But Kaylin, in his archetype, and he's a winner, where they do usually try to build up winners, but he's also going to win all the challenges and be like the golden boy that you think the casuals would love, he'd be getting, I think, a crazy edit. Like, it would seem like he played like the best game of all time if he won, but instead he's being under-edited, so it's not a good edit for Kaylin, because it's, if anything, I think, I don't know, in my fan fiction, not giving him enough credit.
Mm-hmm.
And usually they might try to over-credit an archetype like that, so it's like really down on that. But I do think there was, good stuff there. Who else have we? Paulie? Can we talk about Paulie?
Yeah, okay. So I can you clarify something for me, Shannon? Because I'm a little confused when we do these weekly check-ins, because there's been this running narrative of Paulie is this snake oil salesman. He's so sleazy. I'm having trouble figuring out, was there a particular inflection point where that perception came from? And maybe it was like when he ended up going along with the Noonan vote, was it then like, oh, he'll throw his closest ally under the bus? And then why does it reverse? Again, this guy was dead to rights 2 days before all of this. And they basically treat him like he's not there. Like he's a ghost vote of like, oh, well, we can't vote for Paulie, obviously. Why not? You had no problem doing so 2 days prior.
No, I knew that he was home once he was saved last time. Not due to anything he had done, but because so much had changed. Like Miles and AJ become massive targets, and then they're throwing it back on Logan. Like at that point, the impetus had changed to upend the whole structure. And I guess that's what you can say that Miles did in the move. My counterpoint would be, it seems like he could have done a lot of the stuff without that being the move. Like a lot of it he could have done with like Logan's idol and targeting her. And the second part is that impetus could have been in targeting Logan or Laura last time with the idol, which is what, again, I thought he would do. But instead he doesn't do that. But then like Miles is right in that he's like, people weren't kind of, for a couple of episodes at least, just like really playing. And he kind of throws a cat amongst pigeons. And then with other information, I think really targets Logan. So at that point, the Paulie thing is like ancient history. Like so much more has happened since then. It has taken precedent over Paulie.
Yeah, I guess that's true. That like at that point, there's become much bigger targets. But it's also, I feel like we got obviously a lot about Paulie being so indebted to Miles. Interesting saying like, I'm your number 2, because he pretty much acknowledges like, yeah, AJ is your number 1. I mean, poor Noonan, considering that Paulie already made the Jack Rose comparison as
I
well.
know.
Now
Well, to be fair, that would be a very concerning comparison if I were Miles, because he said there's only room for one on the door.
But I think what's also interesting is, like, what is that 3-person relationship like? Because AJ went so freaking hard for Paulie, including through
I know,
the
it's so
merge vote.
funny.
Then
It's
now
so
it's like,
funny.
okay, I guess I have to, like, you're a friend of my friend, so I guess you're not my enemy anymore. But like, do I really trust you anymore? But what about the first part of my question?
The
Can
snake
you,
oil?
yeah,
Yeah.
can you pinpoint where that perception came from and why?
The AJ Paulie trajectory, firstly, incredible. I want
Yeah.
to chart it. Like, I want to make a timeline and like, but in a graph, because it's unbelievable. He was getting them to throw challenges for Paulie once upon a time, and then it went so badly. And then he's the main person targeting Paulie, and now he's the main person, one of the main people who saved Paulie. Wonderful. Why is he a snake oil salesman? Some people, firstly, have the vibe, and even if it's, I'm not even saying this is true of Paulie, but even if it's incorrect, we saw that with Ferris last season.
Yeah.
And certainly sometimes I think demographic things can come into how people just perceive you. With Ferris, it was like absolutely untrue. With Paulie, I wouldn't say that it's on the Noonan vote. I think that would be unfair, especially if you go to the other side of like, you know, well, I mean, look, Zara has caught flack, but like they all were needing to throw each other under the bus on the other side. On the other side, Miles, Laura, Zara, they were all just trying to survive. And I think it would be, as much as I criticize Paulie strategically for not, you know, getting something done as a group on Braun, I can't criticize him, you know, in terms of what he's willing to do when he's on the bottom in a terrible spot. In terms of, you know, letting Noonan go, which seemed to really break his heart. I think it's probably just more of a demeanor thing. Like they just feel like he's a snake oil salesman. Like it's the way that he's always wheeling and dealing. Like we see that with Paulie all the time. He always has a plan, you know, and I think it's just that. I think it's more just like an affect than any like material moment.
Which again, perception is reality out there. I mean, we even get that scene, right, where like before the Noonan vote, he like, well, AJ's gone, let me just talk to you about everything that happened. They're like, oh, you should go into politics. And so like that's kind of a death sentence.
He's always playing.
Yeah, which again is really interesting because he's been so, again, clawless over the course of this entire post-merge that he was one of 2 people left out of the first vote. He was, you know, everyone was kind of left out of Miles's move, but he was the only one left out of like the big vote that was against him and was just told to throw out a name. And so to watch his trajectory, even without the AJ stuff, right? Like such a position of power on Braun 1.0, and it has been such a dip. And now that he got saved, he's found this afterlife and it's starting to pick back up.
Well, it's not even just the merge, as you mentioned. It's the fact that he, through 4 tribal councils, was voted out, played his own idol, was going home, Ben left, was narrowly chosen over Jesse, and then was saved by Miles. And now I think has space. Even if Miles isn't factoring in him long term, he I think, okay, my words are losing me. I think he's in a good spot because he's kind of in the middle here, and there's this big power struggle happening that he's not really a part of. And if the hierarchy gets upended, it feels like that'll go on to AJ and Miles, and not necessarily him. And there are now just like way bigger fish. Like I think Paulie has daylight.
Yeah, and
what a difference a day makes.
Well, because now he is regarded as like an easy vote, and I think that it's going to be a when, not if, that AJ and Miles are going to make another move. Now, whether the move is we want to really like nail down the graduates, whether it's like, oh, I don't trust Karin and Zara together, whether it's, hell, it might even be like Kaylin's going to beat us in these endgame challenges, we need to get rid of him. They know they had a locked in vote in Paulie because, again, Paulie seems like at this point, as we talked about with Logan, socially, he is so unmoored and is somebody that from our perspective doesn't really seem like he can work with anybody else. And so I think he can become a very key factor in the end game. Not to mention, if he sits at the end, yeah, it's a fun narrative that, to your point, he's basically been saved like 4 times. Do we think a jury will necessarily vote for him, especially given this background that he has and the way that he is being looked at? I'm not incredibly sure. In fact, I would say AJ and Miles should be looking to go to the final 3 with Paulie.
Oh, well, AJ and Paulie together in the final 2 is, again, the best journey.
You have to vote for one of us.
But it's also just like, again, the trajectory is incredible. I mean, look, given the way that the edit has kind of montaged him talking about his swap struggles, it feels like a jury might not be so kind to the way that he like talks about facing that adversity. But it is a wonderful story, and yeah, Paulie does have a way to go, and then he's like a challenge threat and stuff. Like this is crazy. Like he was on.
Yeah, but then he
balled
failed the
Jester.
challenge that they thought he would be good at. So it's like it's perfect as well. It's like, oh well, he's not as threatening as Kaylin. We can get rid of him later.
Man, even Kaylin. Like it's crazy. I want to talk about one last thing before we get to the chizzy, which was that they were taught. So it was in the background of the very interesting idol
which
stuff
was
that was
so good. Which was massive kudos to the editors for turning down the slider on the tribal council chatter and turning up all the whispering that was going on. It was just such a brilliant sound effect of how when you're in those environments, like you tune out everything that's around you, and also a bit of a meta call out that like, yeah, there's so much fluff that goes on with all these questions at tribal council, especially with 11 people, that like, let's really focus in on what's happening and try not to read whispers too much.
But I was actually fascinated by this conversation. We get like the other side of the edit where we're not seeing the idol stuff and we're just hearing the full jury conversation, because it was about the jury, which is, you know, my favorite, most complex part of Survivor.
I love it so much.
And I really like, it's interesting because I disagreed with the way they were talking about it, but in complex ways. So if you weren't listening to this part, because the more interesting idol stuff was happening, basically JLP, they were talking about it kind of went from like, you know, the pair aspect of it all and sending over people to the jury who basically will be advocates for someone at the end because they all have a buddy, which is, of course, to be fair, like not only just a part of the game, but something that has been weaponized, but like a Tony sending Trish to like actively have an advocate. And if they're all going to have advocates, then they kind of none of them do.
They all cancel each other out, right? Like, well, that's interesting because there's a lot of talk about like, oh, how will so-and-so work as a first juror? I mean, again, what's also interesting is like in Laura being sent as a first juror over Logan, I think she actually might utilize more influence than Logan, because again, Logan is kind of a bit of a hot button issue at the moment where where future jurors like might be like, oh, that's just Logan, she's being over dramatic. Whereas with Laura, they might be like, oh, interesting. Okay, I might be listening to you more. But yeah, to your point, if it's like, oh, AJ, you're defending Miles, and Laura, you're defending Logan in this crazy Miles Logan final too. Like, I know you're probably going to do this, so I'm just not going to regard your argument whatsoever.
And well, to be fair, I've also credited Laura for winning like the narrative war against Zara. So as a first juror, like maybe that will be helpful. But what the conversation kind of manifested then in talking about like biases and like being impartial. And I disagreed with the conversation, which was like the way JLP put it out there was like, can you be an impartial jury? And what I disagree with is that it's actually not the goal of a Survivor jury to be impartial, and putting it out there like a metric is something that I disagree with. Now, I wrote an article about the Survivor jury that I'm going to plug now. It's the pinned tweet on my Twitter, and it's like probably my favorite thing I've ever written. I put a lot of thought into it. So if you want more of the nuance, I would think go and read that. But basically what I feel like is like, if you can be impartial and unemotional, I will probably respect that for you as a juror. That's a quality in humans. You know, if you can be like the bigger person in a game, like, and you be like basically like a good sport, that is a quality that we as humans judge positively. So like, while I will respect that, I still fight for your right to be impartial. You know, I still might want to criticize your vote.
It's preferable, but it's not necessary.
Well, yeah, it was like it's interesting that I would disagree with this, because it's like, yeah, I do like when people are impartial, but I still want to fight for your right to be biased, not bigoted. And this is what the article kind of talks about, is like, there are ways that you can be wrong. And I think like being bigoted is one of those things. Having the wrong information is one of those things. But again, even if you're wrong, you're technically entitled to be wrong. That's the first thing. And then there are ways that you can also, you know, vote in ways that I would maybe criticize as a human, or be ways that I say are bad. Like you're highly emotional or you're hypocritical. These are things that we criticize in human beings, but you are, again, entitled to vote that way. I will then criticize you, but you are allowed to do it. So I think that it was dictating the jury is one thing, which is not, that I disagree with. And I feel like the complexity of the jury where that can be true is not a bug. It's a feature. It's part of the emotionality of it. And when someone like Kate is like, you know, don't be butthurt, don't be in high school. I'm like, to be fair, being upset when you get voted out of a game for $500,000 that's built on trust is like a very valid emotion and concern. Like, that's not like,
this is an emotional experience. Like, I'm sorry, Kate. Like, good on you for feeling like if you're holding grudges, maybe you shouldn't be here. I think you're also talking from a position where like you have not been betrayed in a major way, where you might feel that need to hold grudges, because look, Survivor is a viscerally emotional experience. You are putting your body, mind, and soul into a 24-hour day game that has now been encompassing a month and will encompass 15 to 17 days more for a life-changing amount of money. You made a very salient point, which is why I love the jury system, which is it's incredibly complex because people will feel certain ways about you. In some ways, you can't control that. In some ways, you can. We talk about this all the time when we discuss the final juror thing. I think for me, it just feels too hamstrung to dictate, like, well, you shouldn't be bitter about what happened. Because A, I think that is way too coloring of a term, and that comes with like a certain connotation to it. And B, like, that is too, and you know what? Maybe there's a reason why she wants to keep AJ around if she truly feels like you don't need to be people. You don't need to hold grudges. Like, if you just be that survivor robot 356, oh no, I got voted out, shifting into juror mode. I will vote for whoever has the best resume. Beep, beep, boop.
Well, I can be way pettier than, being voted out of Survivor, which is legitimately devastating. So I think that firstly, like, minimizing that is something that I disagree with. And again, like,
Yeah.
when like Maria doesn't vote for Charlie, like, it's hypocritical, and I will criticize it. I criticize it as a friend, and again, like, as a human, I criticize that emotionality. But I think the Survivor jury is created to, like, in complicated ways,
Yeah.
really interact with that emotionality. And I think that when JLP, I don't blame JLP, I think it's an interesting conversation. But when JLP is putting out, like, can you be impartial? It's like, it's not your job to be impartial.
Yeah,
If
impartial
you
to
are
what?
impartial, kudos, like, that's the gold standard. If you aren't, we'll talk about it. Maybe we'll criticize it. Are you hypocritical? For sure. Like, in our analysis, I will criticize it. But I think putting it out as a metric that is wrong or right is what I disagree with. It might be like,
Yeah.
we should strive to be impartial, like, at its best. But putting it out as like it's right to be impartial is just objectively not true of the Survivor jury. That's not, it's not like, okay, the aim of the game is play, be voted out. Well, not be voted, that's not the aim. But like, if you're voted out, you become a jurors and then be an impartial jury. It's just to vote. And you're entitled to all of that for its good and bad. So again, I will fight for your right to be wrong, and then I will criticize you for being wrong. Well, if that makes sense. There's more of that in the article, but I just thought that this was a really fascinating conversation. And not for nothing, if anyone is going to be not impartial, this jury, like, is not going to be impartial.
Like, does Kate realize who she's talking to?
100%. Like, this jury, I'm like, yeah, maybe the way you're speaking speaks to a really fun, almost neutral jury villa culture that I highly doubt. And when we've recording this, are we getting jury villa this season? I don't even know. I mean, it hasn't aired yet.
Question. We don't know.
We should see Laura's jury villa if we see it. I can't imagine that this jury is going to be unbiased or impartial or unemotional. And again, they're entitled to it. I'll criticize it in a couple of weeks if it happens. But this jury specifically, given the way they played the game, I'm sure will be chaotic, messy, emotional, all of that. That has been the season thus far.
And again, the jury, I never say like the winner is, a representation of how the overall season is, just because we've had many WTF winners in many different ways across Survivor history. I think the jury, oftentimes the way they vote kind of is a representation of the tone of the season. Again, with the strategy and the tone that usually gets dictated by the players themselves. And yeah, for me, it's just this implication of like, can you have an impartial jury? Impartial to what is my larger question. Like, is it impartial to feelings then? It's impartial to how you feel about people that you are spending 24 hours a day with. And if so, let's go with this logic then. Let's say you should not regard your relationships and emotions to these people. Okay, let's just go off of game. What are you voting off of? Are you voting off of challenges? Are you voting off of strategy? How many moves they made? Were you voting off of what their correct voting percentage is? Are you voting off of idols that are being used? You see how it's impossible to come up with a rubric or a set of criteria. That's what I'm obsessed with this jury, is that you are presenting a thesis in front of 7 to 9 different professors who all have different lines of logic, different rubrics as to what they want. Let's not try to create the rubric ourselves, people.
That's a very good point. It's a broken question, and it's based on the idea that like legal jury should be impartial and like completely detached. Obviously, like if you're not, you are removed from the jury. I saw that movie, The Second Juror, who we're going to find out who that is on Sunday night.
I know it's called Juror Number 2, but I love how you really laid it up by calling it The Second Juror.
Whatever. But it was a good movie, I thought. Yeah, it's completely different from the Survivor jury because again, that has something you actually have to strive for. I actually talked about this with Shan on her second deep dive, which I found fascinating because she got caught up clearly badly twice in the fact that they're so different, and she did not realize that until seemingly that deep dive until it was way too late. So yeah, like in a court of law, my brother can as a lawyer can help more with this, but like you have to be a certain way, and that actually is the metric, and there is an objective metric. But for Survivor, there isn't, because as you're saying, there's no criteria that you have to judge it on. So again, what is it being impartial to? There's nothing that says that it has to be impersonal, because it is personal by design,
game.
and that's the beauty.
And that's the thing, when people say it's not personal, it's a game. It's personal because you're a person.
Yeah, and the other thing about it is that I've spoken about this a lot with actually what's going to be one of my feedback guests with Omar, but it's people at their worst coming out of the game. Like the bitterness is again there by design. It makes people their worst selves, which again, we might criticize in its hypocrisy, in its emotionality, in its unfairness to the final tribal council competitor. But that's why it's so brilliant. So again, I think the nuance is there where I'm like, I will fight for you to be your worst self, and then I will criticize you for being your worst self. But when you're putting the objective metric of being impartial on it, you're simply not only just incorrect, but it's a broken question that it is based on a completely different jury system that is not Survivor. And if it were true, if that were the thing where it's like, firstly, it would be impossible, but like go into Jury Villa and become your most impartial and write out the pros and cons and vote on that. It would be impossible for people who are at their most hurt. Maybe they hurt themselves and they're projecting. Maybe other people have hurt them. Maybe they were entitled to hurt them. This is the game. You know, not everyone can win. But the important thing about it is not only would it be impossible, is it would be boring. And what we have is so much better. And that's why Survivor is what it is. So,
and to your point, I think this is going to be a very fun jury, especially if we have some particularly messy people sitting in the end. Again, I'm still manifesting this AJ Miles final two with maybe like a side dish of Paulie at the final three. I think this would be a very, very fun jury. If we had all the Coven on the jury, whoo, you don't even need to bring torches into tribal council. They were light it ablaze on their behalf.
There's your White Lotus. The Coven and Jury Villa is literally season 4 of the White Lotus. Oh my God, I love it. Okay, well, I love talking about the jury with you. Should we talk about the Chizzy before we wrap up? Take it away, Jacob Sego-Weinstein and MC Color.
1, 2, 3. 1, 1, 1, 3, 1, 1, 3, 1, 1, 3. It's getting kind of chizzy. 3, 2, 1.
All right. For one of the first times this season, I'm struggling because I have too many people to fit into the Chizzy.
Everyone was too good this episode.
Not everyone. Some of the people very, very
Well,
bad.
It also helps when we have, again, this is the good thing about, as much as, yes, we're only down to 11 people, less than half the cast. This is the merge. Everyone is like playing actively within one tribe, right? So there's more attention being given as opposed to, well, half these people didn't go to tribal council in this episode, so they're not getting as much attention.
Well, it's still a lot of people who've been doing a lot of things, just mostly negatively. But here, some people actually won the day. So I was going to say that I might change my points based on yours, but I think I feel good enough about just giving my points. I'm going to give 3 to AJ, the janitor. He got Morgan and Kate by himself. How and why? TBD. But it worked. And
maybe we'll find out next episode, like with Miles, is all part of some Grandmaster plan.
No, when Morgan and Kate, when I'm seeing 2 key swing votes say, I don't want AJ to go, and like how much they like AJ, 3 points to AJ. That's the game. But he also lost Karin, but that was in the past. We've criticized him for that. And
that was swap AJ. This is a brand new AJ.
Well, he's also been chaotic in the merge, but like even like he covered well with Zara to get Zara back. Like the numbers that have come back have been AJ managing things well, and that's mostly on Morgan and Kate, and that's the day. That's the game. So that's AJ. I'm giving 2 to Zara. I feel like she's crucial to keeping Karin on side. I feel like stowing them as a double agent is very important. And I think she's in a really good spot. Obviously, right to go with the graduates over the Coven because she feels way better about them. And the Coven would be a terrible space for her to go, given the fact that she's in like an all-out war with one of the members. And it's just been brewing for days to weeks. So I think that's great from Zara. And then I really struggled between the last 2 because I wanted to give a point to Miles and to Kaylin. I'm going to give the point to Miles. He wins the day. I feel like as well, not playing the idol was a good presence of mind to trust the split as intended. We said with Logan yesterday, I felt like just got lucky. She could not have possibly known where AJ and Miles were going at the point where all the Paulie votes were about to be negated and AJ and Miles are clearly up to something. Whereas this was a split that worked. And I think that he trusted it correctly. And even the things that Miles was saying to AJ, where he was like, what can Karin do individually? There was stuff she could do, but would she do it? No. And I think he's reading those relationships correctly of like the safety he has in the numbers that played out, and he keeps his idol for that reason. And he has a secret idol that only AJ, we've seen him tell, knows about, and the other idols are gone. So that's where Miles is at. I'm giving him a point. I wanted to give a point to Kaylin too. Kaylin has been picking up points along the way, not confessionals, but he's also showing the other side. His social game is clearly great. Everyone likes him. His idol information is really crucial. The point for Miles, I think that like he really pushes the idol stuff with Logan. And while it felt a little too open for me, it clearly worked as well. So it's his win. And that's my points. I feel good about it.
All right. I'll work my way up because I usually do for climactic reasons, but
you already said you're giving 3 to Miles. So
yes, but I do have a couple things I want to bring up about Miles, so I will save that for last.
Yeah.
So I will give 1 to AJ, and I think the point is incredibly salient that the Kate and Morgan relationship seemed to be key to bringing them over. It should be said though that, and one of the reasons why I will give Miles more points than AJ is the fact that AJ was the primary on this split that Logan and Laura were going for. They're like, even after all that, AJ is still being looked at. You know, Logan is still bringing this axe to grind with AJ into the post-merge. That clearly he is, despite what Miles just did single-handedly, AJ is still being looked at as kind of the alpha of this pair. And that's not a great position to be in. It's a lot better now. It's a lot better now. But that to me sort of represented the fact that he still is being looked at as someone that can get targeted over somebody like Miles.
Okay. Fair and counterpoint. They can't do it because people do not want to vote him out.
That's true. That's valid as well.
That is fair. Yeah.
I'm gonna give 2 points to Karin. And look, this could entirely this could blow up next episode. But yes. I am totally fine with the half measure that she did. I also want to do it in support of the fact that she does not flip. And the fact that she had the ability to do so, again, I think speaks to the relationships that she was able to manage with basically all parties involved, right? That she actually had an active conversation with Kristen and was like, we could do this if we wanted to. I think speaks to her position. I think despite maybe what the preview is saying, like she might not get away with it. I think in the moment I understood what she did. It was a calculated risk. It was a risk nonetheless. And I wanted to acknowledge it. 3 points to Miles. I think for me, maybe is a little bit of it in retrospect, like, and you made a very salient point earlier of like, it's not because of what he did. Maybe it's also in spite of it. But like the fact that he made a decision that not even his closest ally knew about, had a bunch of people angry at him and did not get a vote against him. Like he was the secondary on the split that Logan and Laura were coming up with. And as a result, did not get a vote against him somehow. And also, I think speaking to like a little bit of his perception, I mean, fashion sense to die for, him rocking in with the buff bandeau and the top knot, but like also kind of playing into what he vocalized early in the episode, right? Of like, even after this, I'm being underestimated as just like the goofy guy. I don't know if you noticed this actually, Shannon. Speaking of style, this is one of my Miles points. Have you noticed the change in eyewear for Miles?
I have not. Because I didn't even notice that Jerry had a nipple tattoo until Owen pointed it out to me in week 7. So I'm not like on the fashion details. Well, I noticed the space buns.
This is a little less conspicuous than that. But Miles has ditched his like Dwight Schrute, big lens glasses. In lieu of this like turquoise lavender combo that's a little bit more, rectangular, a little bit smoother, a little bit thinner that he's been wearing. I've seen him in confessionals. I've seen him on the beach. I don't know if this is someone else's glasses that he has co-opted with the same prescription, if he has a second pair, but like this is kind of his he's all that moment, much like Andy, where like he's taking off the glasses and putting on a new pair in that way. So I want to give kudos to the Rat King. We'll also maybe addressing a couple things he said in this episode that I was not a big fan of. Can we talk about this moment at the beginning of the episode, Shannon, when he's decompressing from all of this on the beach with AJ and says, that reaction was worth $500,000. It doesn't matter to me if it wins me the game. That reaction was worth it. Part of me hopes that was him trying to project something onto AJ of like, I'm just a chaotic guy. I don't care about winning. Because otherwise, don't say that. We like to watch people make fun, silly moves that helps, us fill these microphones with blathering. At the same time, maybe don't actively tank your game for the sake of lulz, if that's indeed what you were trying to do.
Well, firstly, AJ knew about the plan, right? He voted for Petey.
Yeah,
So
I get. Yeah, that had to be. Well,
Yeah.
no, because it wasn't the case though that AJ was like, there was that discussion of like who's gonna throw a vote on to PD, and AJ's like, I'll do it.
I've been thinking this whole time. I assume AJ knew.
I would imagine he knew as
Yeah,
well.
and is just covering. Yeah, because it's true. I mean, making AJ the split when he's the person you specifically don't trust, when you have like more than enough numbers on the alpha, does seem silly. But Pooh and I did discuss that yesterday. Like, it's either that they're splitting in for Logan and you can't trust them, or there's no split, which is, scary in and of itself.
Right.
Once Paulie's going to be fully protected. Secondly, the idea of Miles just walking around the beach bumping into things because he's wearing glasses that do not fit his prescription is hilarious to me. Thirdly, it is possible that like he made the move intending it to be a good move, and at the point where it's blown up and everyone's like, "You'll be out next," he's like, "Well, at least we had that." Like at that point, like it's a cope. So I don't know that it's necessarily like him being like, "This is going to be a bad move." Like I think he intended to do a good thing. He wanted to have fun, but I think like he'd at least convinced himself it would be good. And then when it's not panning out well, like you need to justify it, and then they rally and they get stuff done.
Well, on that note, I do want to bring up something that you had brought up towards the end of the episode, which is Miles talking about, I was sick of people not drawing a line in the sand. It was too kumbaya. Things were too buddy-buddy. And I understand your point that, like, theoretically things did get flipped here and Logan does go. But I don't know, this, I admit this really just scratches at one of my pet peeves that I've talked about many times on these Survivor podcasts, right? Which is when players accuse others in game of, quote, not playing the game. I think it could be easily weaponized as in-season logic, right? To get people to do what you want. But outside from an objective perspective, it is laughable because it usually just implies you're not playing the game I want you to play, which is you're not playing the game to serve me. The one that I always go back to is when Sierra Easton is about to get voted out of Survivor Cambodia. This is the argument she makes of like, nobody wants to make big moves. Everyone's too afraid. But it's like, no, Sierra, just nobody incorporates you into your plans. So like, it always rankles me. And again, I don't know. For me, yes, I guess getting rid of Logan / Laura was a big thing. But like, him complaining that, these votes have been stale. First off, dude, maybe you really have been on the outs this entire pre-merge, because like this pre-merge was not stale whatsoever until all the shenanigans that were happening. Two, I don't know if the representation of a non-stale vote is a 9-2 split against a pair that was left on the outs.
No, this wasn't stale. I mean, it was the whole hierarchy flipped.
I mean, I would still say that, like, if he was complaining that the lines weren't drawn in the sand, they're not really drawn in the sand in this
I think they are. I think they are because people flipped to the bottom of a majority. Like, I still think that there's now people on top and that it was a bit of a line. I mean, this upended everything. I think that he was pretty good about not being super self-righteous when he's clearly frustrated that, yes, people aren't playing by making moves that will upend things, and he's at the bottom and will get picked off. Like, yes, you need things to be upended. I feel like that the frustration he felt was mostly, I think, clearly from that, where it's about his own position and his frustration at like not having agency at that point. I didn't know that it was like super self-righteous, but yeah, I do get it. I mean, at the point where Logan and Laura have had the power, they are playing. They're playing by maintaining a group that is positive for them. But now you're playing back to achieve something to get one over on them. But this upended everything. Even though it was 9-2, that's because Kristen and Karin have to fold in is the first part. And at that point, it's like, it's 7-4, but then there are other swings where we're questioning it. And like everyone is different. Again, like Laura got 5 of my last 20 points and now is out of the game. Everything I know is a lie. Like this changed everything.
Well, this was
worth an OMG marketing post.
This feels very Big Brothery to me in terms of like when the eviction vote goes down, that like if you have a tight majority, you can flip it, sort of like what we saw with the alley vote. But sometimes if people sort of see the writing on the wall, they kind of go along with the house and the votes become a little bit more unanimous in that regard. That's what these votes have kind of been reminding me of.
And I think the most important thing for me is I genuinely just didn't know which way it was going to go. Like until the last one, I didn't know if Logan would not trust Karin and be like, screw it.
Yeah, which would have been amazing, right? That like she went out not trusting Karin, and like just the pinnacle of the Coven of like, you're telling me a way to save myself, but I just can't trust you, Karin. There's something about you. Would have been absolutely poetic beauty, especially for Laura. And actually, that's probably the sprinkles on top of the dessert of what Miles was able to provide in this episode is the fact that he's able to really have Laura's gut just go into absolutely the wrong direction, right? By having this conversation with her and being like, no, you can trust me. We're still doing it. And like, she actually believed it. He was able to bank on all these days of them working together to completely mislead her in the other direction, to the point you made about the possible Logan, rankling against Karin in the future. Like, if Laura got a bad sense from Miles, she could maybe try to turn things around. But I think a large reason why Laura stays complacent is because she gets the signal from Miles that everything's copacetic.
That is true. He as well is knowing them, as well as like Zara and Kaylin are. Less than like AJ is like giving Logan this like fake plan. I think that Laura thought she had the leverage with Miles and underestimated Miles. And Miles is good at like using being underestimated, and he wins the day. So I mean, yeah, I didn't know if, because they were counting the votes and asking people questions at Tribal Council. I didn't know if Logan would be like, I think we're okay. At the point where obviously she plays the idol. I didn't know which way Karin and Kristen were going to go, and you understand it either way. So and they're all massive characters. Like losing Laura here is a massive character after some purple boots.
Should we memorialize her a bit? I mean, she's going to be serving looks on the jury, but like, again, and maybe this was something I tried to prognosticate and do my own sort of like Coven forecasting in the pre-jury, where I'm like, I don't think she's going to be the kooky character that her byline is presenting her as. And I do not think that's the case whatsoever. We talked about the delicious complexity that exists within us as human beings and how that plays into a jury. Nowhere is that more representative than someone like Laura, who, definitely rankled and infuriated people both on and off islands sometimes about how like she would do things to serve her game and then be mad when other people would do things to serve their game despite being in the alliance. Like she was kind of like the Coven contained in one person sometimes, in terms of like,
that's great.
Loving some people one day, hating people the next, the sort of like simultaneous indignancy of what people were doing versus like the insistency to say no, my way or the highway. Like, it makes sense. She was the one that came up with the alliance name. And so I'm really intrigued to see how she's going to be on the jury, because again, I think that sometimes the jury four-person does set the tone, as Laura is talking about. She is going to be the one that is going to be chatting with all these people as they come in. But at the same time, this is going to be a very opinionated jury as well. So she might just be another voice in the masses.
I mean, she definitely personified the Coven. She's a witch.
That's true as well.
The Coven. So yeah, it was high stakes. I didn't know which way I was going to go. This was fun. This was a really fun episode to make for a fun week, to get into what's been, I think, a fun season. So I'm enjoying it.
Yeah.
And I'll keep talking about it. We'll have an exit interview with, I guess, TBD. I haven't checked my emails this morning. And
I hope it's Laura.
Yeah. Don't put your thumb on the scale. What if it's not? But between us. And then we have the feedback show. Oh, this is what I want to ask. Which of the recap bitches are the feedback show guests? So we have Zach, Omer, and Marianne. And this is the three that I want to talk about this week. So who do you think? I feel like I've got it so clearly in my mind.
I mean, I do as well. I mean, I don't know. I've had this picture of Zach Wurtenberger in my head, maybe because it happens when I look in the mirror, but even from like the Survivor 42 cast, when Rob looked at Zach's photo and was like, oh my God, they got your son out there somehow. So I think I'm Zach.
No,
already okay, wrong. So I'm already wrong. All right, so illuminate this for me.
No, who do you think? Okay, you think you're Zach. How else are you wrong?
I think Chappelle is Omer. I think both are definitely bringers of chaos and hot takes. And I think Puya and Marianne, because I think both can be very trolly.
Okay. I think that I know that we have the Pokemon evolution photo that's Zach, you, Peter, and I see that from an aesthetic perspective, but Zach's too dry compared to you.
I'm very wet. That's true. I'm quite moist.
Would Zach ever say that?
Yes, you absolutely would say that.
I don't think he would. I regret everything leading me in my life up to this point, though. With your Marianne, I was gonna say that you're Marianne because you are like, bundles of joy. But now I feel like I don't want to be as positive about.
I was gonna say, well, I would say if anything, I would absolutely adore the comparison to Marianne in general. But I'm also very Omer in terms of just like completely flying off the handle.
That is true. No, I think you must be Marianne, and Chappelle will hate this, but he will be wrong that he is definitely Omer. And then I think Puya is like Zach.
I think that makes sense.
I'm going to ask the feedback guests which of the recap bitches they think they are. This is a trios. I googled trios, but I think that's one.
Yeah, let's reverse this curse. Speaking of Coven a little bit, why don't you ask them who they compare themselves to? Have them take their own which RHAP personality are you quiz.
Do people care about this? It doesn't matter. I love it. Mike, tell people where they can find you.
All right. Well, you can, of course, find everything I'm doing at a Mike Bloom type, unless you'd like to chastise me for calling Kaylin boring or saying I was very wet, in which case you could at Shannon Guss if you'd like to.
No,
That'd be
I agree
greatly
with you.
appreciated.
You should at Mike for that. Yeah.
So my usual stuff, covering Survivor, covering The Amazing Race, and actually I will have the person that you compare to yours truly, Marianne, on the B&B this coming weekend as we're
Aw.
facing our... Listen, this Survivor 48 swap has a lot to live up to in terms of swaps in 2025, considering all the chaos that AU brought. But if there's any group to bring the chaos, it's going to bring Survivor 48. So very excited to get into that. And there should be a reality flash coming out this week because there was a new reality show featuring a bunch of random all-stars that is yet again released into the ether. Maybe one more by the time this podcast comes out. So I'm going to get a little reality flash together to talk about what those random shows are, why they're popping up. Is it purely due to the traders? Who's involved in all of these shenanigans and much more? So yeah. And who knows, Shannon, we might come back a week from now. Maybe not if it comes down to 2 episodes a week. This is truly a 2025 mentality, Shannon. We're like, I don't know where I'm going to be 7 days from now.
Yes. Well, we know globalsurvivor.com so you don't miss any of that, no matter what the episodes are happening. I'm still like, is this airing tomorrow? Are we putting this? I think we're putting this podcast out.
Well, happy Sunday if that's not the case.
That would be so bad. I think it's okay. Feedback show, exit interview, and then Survivor Global. I actually was with Puya, the Zach of the recap bitches, talking about Survivor 48 in a podcast that I thought was really, really fun. Very, very complex, some of the 48 stuff. And then I'm like, some of the rules I'm like still thinking about now. The podcast is over and I'm like, but another point, just like when I can't fall asleep at night. So really like that one. So highly recommend you check it out before episode 4. That's it. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for everything except like that last little moment.
You know what? Honestly, if there's one moment that's the exception, that's usually an improvement. So I'm happy it's only the 1%.
Yes. Okay. The rest was wonderful. Wonderful job. Thank you. Thank you to our team behind the scenes. Thank you to the listeners. And I will see you next time. Bye.
This is RHAP. We know reality TV.